segment 1, Introduction to Excel. So, our course, this entire course is about analyzing data, as JV just spoke, and the tool that we are going to use is a tool called Spreadsheets. Now, depending on which suite of tools you use, this could be called Google Sheets in Google or Microsoft Excel. I personally prefer to use Microsoft Excel, but that is a matter of personal choice. Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel have roughly the same functionality. So, what we will do in this segment is get an understanding of how Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets works. So, open up the Excel program and you will see that there is a menu that comes up: file, home, insert, page layout, etc. The basic document that any of this spreadsheeting software works on is called a workbook. So, what we are going to do now is open an existing workbook. So, you could of course create a new workbook by, so you go to file, new, and that will create a new workbook for you. But I have one workbook that has some data, so I am going to open that data. Okay. So, I am going to close this workbook. Again, to close a workbook, you go to file and close, and I will open an existing workbook. So, I do not want to save these. Now, if you look at this workbook, you will see that the workbook actually divides itself into two sort of broad areas, right. At the top over here, you will see that there is a right over here, you will see that there is a set of buttons that allow you to do various things, and this sort of set of buttons is called the ribbon, right. If you are familiar with any other software like Word or PPT, those software also have a similar ribbon at top, which have functionality like cut, copy, etc. The bulk of the screen is taken up by a table which has rows and columns. So, if you look at first, let us look at the ribbon. The ribbon will give you, let us say, 3 or 4 key parameters. So, first of all, it gives you a set of functions to do cut and copy. Again, this is very similar to how Microsoft Word or Google Doc works. So, we can start from there. Let us perhaps, to see how cut and copy works, let us go first to the worksheet. So, the workbook will consist of multiple sheets. You can see the sheets being listed down below. So, this workbook has 2 sheets, sheet 1 and sheet 2. You can switch between sheets by clicking on this tab here, right. So, you can see that sheet 1 is empty, sheet 2 has some data in it. You can also add a sheet by clicking on this plus sign, and that will create then a new sheet in which you could store something, right. My data, let us call it, right, my data. You can also delete a sheet by clicking on this tab and saying delete, right. So, that gives you ability to do a little bit with some of the worksheets. So, let us now start looking at what is in a worksheet, right. So, a worksheet is basically a very, very large table of rows and columns. So, if you look at what you have here, you have rows that are named A, B, C, D and so on. If I go right to the end, you can see that it goes to AD. Actually, it will go even further. If I add more rows, it will keep just going until I think ZZ. Okay. So, it will go till XFD, and if I am not mistaken, that is something like 10,000 odd rows. Similarly, if you go, I will go back to A1. You can also then look at a number of rows. So, you can see row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and then you go right down, and that is it's a lakh and 5,000 roughly. So, so you can get a lakh and 5,000 rows and a lakh and 5,000 columns, right. Now, if you are wondering how I am jumping right to the end of the sheet, control right arrow will take you to the last column, control left arrow will take you to the first column, control down arrow will take you to the last row, control right arrow will take you to the first row. So, you can navigate this sheet, you can pick which is the current cell that you are working on by navigating either with arrows, which is what I am doing now. So, I am going down one row, I am going right one column, again down one row, or you can also pick a row by a cell by just clicking on it. Each cell has what is called an address. So, the cell that I have currently picked is called cell E4, and why is it called E4? It is because it is in column E and it is in row 4, right. So, you could have cell E4 and I could store some data in it, I could store, let us say, the number 4, right. Now, I can then go to, let us say, cell D5 and store another number in it, let us say I store 7, right. Each cell can store any data that you wanted to store, right. So, right now I have stored 2 numbers, I could also very well have stored pieces of text, right. So, I will say this course is business data management. So, now what have I done in the cell E4, I have now stored the string business data management, right. So, you can, as an example, store a string which is a series or a text item, you can store numbers. I could also store, so here I have shown you how to store integers, you could equally well store decimals, right. So, I could have stored 4.2, I could have stored 7.8, right. So, you can store integers, you can store decimals or real numbers, you can store strings. What else can you store? You could store percentages. So, I could store something as 0.11. Now, 0.11 is a number between 0 and 1. So, I could in theory interpret it as a percentage. Now, if I want to show something as a percentage, there is if you go to the ribbon, there are a bunch of buttons here that will allow you to decide how to present the data that you have stored. By default, Excel will show the data as a data type called general, right. So, all the data that we have stored right now in Excel does not understand whether it is a number, whether it is a percentage, whether it is a string, any of this, right. I could, if I wanted, choose to show this number as a number, right. So, if I click on this drop down box, you can see that I can show this, there are various number formats that are available. We will not go into all of them, but let me give you a flavor and then you can play around with it yourself, right. So, one example is I could show this as a number. Now, you notice that the moment I say number, by default Excel will assume that it is a decimal number, it is not an integer, right. So, it will show it as 4.00, by default it will show you 2 decimal places after the decimal point, right. I could, if I wanted, show fewer decimal places, right. So, I could say decrease decimal. So, if I said, let me go back, if I said decrease decimal, instead of showing it as 4.00, it will now show it as 4.0. if I clicked decrease decimal once again, then it would really show me only the integer portion and just show it as 4. Same way, if I clicked on 7, right, and I said increase decimal, right. Now, note that increase decimal you cannot do on a number that is on a data that is being displayed as general. So, let us go back, right. So, this was general. The moment I clicked increase decimal, look at what happens to the data. It automatically gets interpreted as a number and the data gets displayed as 7.0. I could keep increasing the decimal points, so I could get 7.00. There is, I can keep doing this, right. So, I can get 7 followed by 3 zeros, 7 followed by 4 zeros and so on and so forth. Because I have stored this as 4.2, if I increase the decimal here, it is now going to become 4.20 or 4.200. What happens if I decrease the decimal, right? So, if I go from 4.200 and decrease the decimal, it becomes 4.20. Decrease once again, it becomes 4.2. If I decrease once again, what will happen? Okay, it will show it as 4. Now, what happened to the data? Remember, our data is actually 4.2, but we are only showing 4. Did we lose the value of 0.2? Let us check, let us increase the number of digits after the decimal. And if I do that, you can see that 4.2 actually is stored. It is only the way you display the data that is changing because you click on these buttons, right. Now, let us look at 7.8. 7.8, if I decrease the decimal, what happens? Why did 7.8 become 8? So, when you are displaying only one decimal after the decimal point and you say decrease decimal, then the number that is displayed is the decimal fraction rounded off to the nearest integer. So, since 7.8 is bigger than 7.5, it will display as 8. However, the moment I increase decimal, I will go back to 7.8 once again. Okay? And same way, if I look at 0.11, if I decrease the decimal, it will show up as 0.1, and if I decrease the decimal once again, it will show up as 0. Remember that this does not mean that the data associated with 0.11 is lost. It is just that we are displaying it as 0. If I want, I can always look at the complete data. But remember what I told you, 0.11, because it is a number between 0 and 1, I could also choose to interpret this as a percentage, right. If I choose to do that, then I will say I will display this as percentage. You can see this choice here, right. And now, this is being displayed as 11%, right. If I choose to convert back into number, it will once again become 0.11. Is this clear? So, any number between 0.11 between 0 and 1, we could choose to display as a percentage. You could also actually display a higher number. So, I could choose to display 2 as a percentage. Look at what happens when I say display 2 as percent. It shows as 200%, right. So, it interprets the number 2 as 2.00. It will multiply 2.00 by 100 and display that number as a percentage. There is another useful format. So, imagine that I have a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, it is very hard and I want to read out this number as let us say so many lakhs, so many thousands, so many 10,000s, etc. Very hard to read out this number, right. Now, because I have picked a very simple number, I could read it as 123,456,789. but in general it could be a more complex number. Now, there is a convenient format in Excel which is called the comma style. If you click on that, then commas will get displayed, right. Now, this particular Excel is set in an American style, so it will display this in millions. If you choose to set up your Excel or workbook in the Indian style, then it will show it as lakhs. Okay. There is a format, and I would encourage you to explore how to change from American style into Indian style. But the fact that the moment I have these commas, I can now interpret this as 123,456,789. I could of course then decrease the number of decimals after this, right. This style of representation is called the accounting style because mostly finance folks use it, and you will see as we go through our course, a lot of the data that we are going to talk about is about costs, about prices and so on, and it will be represented in this format. So, let us look now at a piece of data that I have. Okay. Now, this data is the marks of the students in a class that I am teaching, right. This class, this course is a joint course between the computer science department and the electrical department. Students have a roll number. So, I have 30 students in my class, roll number 2023001 to 2023030. Each student has a department. So, you can see here are the roll numbers, right, 30 students. How do I know that I have 30 students? If I just select all of these, right. So, what am I doing for selecting? I can press shift and down arrow and it is selecting multiple cells. Okay. The moment I do that, something interesting begins to happen, right. If you look at this count here, right, you can see this function here, it is counting the number of selected cells. Okay. So, this tells me that I have selected 30 cells. Now, it just so happens that the roll numbers are numbers and therefore, you can get other data. Right now, that data is not of interest to us, but let's look at, it does not make sense to add up roll numbers, right. It is also showing me the sum of all roll numbers, but the sum of all roll numbers is not data that we are interested in. So, let us ignore it for now. If you now instead of this, let us go to the department. So, each student has a department. The department could be electrical or computer science. Now, let us select this department, right. And if we select this, you will see that now you do not see any sum or average, you are only seeing the count. And why is that? Because this is text data. Summing or doing an average over text data is does not really make sense. For each student, I also have his or her marks in maths, physics and chemistry on a scale of 0 to 10, right. So, student number 1 has scored 8 marks in maths, 9 marks in physics and 7 marks in chemistry. So, this is how you interpret a row, right. This row represents one student, the data associated with one student. And what is the data associated with one student? What is her roll number? What is her department? What are her marks in physics? Maths first. What are her marks in physics and what are her marks in chemistry? These are the 5 pieces of data that we have associated with each student. So, same way, if I go instead to the next student, his roll number is 2023002, he is also from the elect department and he has got 7 marks in maths, 7 marks in physics and 1 mark in chemistry. Okay. So, this sort of tells you and you must have seen these sorts of mark lists put up on your school notice board or your college notice board, which has the number of the roll number of a student, department, and marks in the in different courses. But of course, you want to know more interesting things, right? I want to know what is the total number of marks that the student with roll number 2023001 got. So, how many marks did she get? She got 8 plus 9 plus 7, which is 24. Now, I am doing this math orally, but ideally I would like to have a way to do this automatically, and that is really where spreadsheets come into their own. So, let us now create a new column here called sum of marks. And what I can do is I can say equal to, and equal to means I am not going to give data, I want you to compute what data should go here, right. I am telling the spreadsheet, I am not going to give you the number to put in this cell, I want you to compute the number that you are going to put here or the data that you are going to put here. And what is the data that I want? I want the data in C2, right, which is this marks of the student in maths, plus I want her marks in physics, which is in cell D2, plus her marks in chemistry, which is E2, right. And if you do this, you can see that you have got the math marks for this student in the sum of the marks that she has got. Now, let us repeat this for the next student, right. Now, his marks are C3 plus D3 plus E3, and so he has got 15. The next student has got C4 plus D4 plus E4, right. So, this is a very powerful thing that spreadsheets can do. They can compute the data in a cell based on the values in other cells instead of you having to feed in the data every time, right. Now, of course, this is a what I just did is I typed the same formula 3 different times and that is a very painful thing, right. So, I could in general, instead of having to do this painfully for every cell, I could copy this formula and I could paste it in the next formula, right. Now, notice something interesting happened. What happened? This formula was C4 plus D4 plus E4. When I pasted the formula that I got was C5 plus D5 plus E5, right. So, it is not really exactly the same formula, but it is doing what I wanted, right. It is now giving me the sum of marks for student number 4. This is called relative referencing, and we will study more about this in the next segment. The other thing that we could do, of course, is I would also want to know what is the average marks that a student has got in maths, right. Now, one simple way to do that is to select all the marks in maths, and now you can see that I have selected 30 data points. The sum of all these marks is 144, but that really is not very interesting to us, right. If I had done this, if I had said, if I had just done this, right, this is of interest, because now if you see the sum is showing me 18. If I just copy our famous formula here, and I think which was this one was it, right. Yeah. So, this student does indeed have 18 marks, right, and you can see that if I just select his 3 marks, you can see the sum here is 18. But if I am looking at all the maths marks, then what is of interest to me perhaps is not so much the sum, but the average. And I know now, if I look at this, that this class has got an average of 4.8 out of 10 in maths. How much has the students got in physics? On an average, they seem to have got 4.26 or 4.27, and in chemistry they've got 4.03. Now, of course, one thing I could do is keep looking at this sort of bottom row here, bottom ribbon here, but I want to store this value in a cell in my sheet. So, how do I do that? Excel now, one thing we saw, of course, is that Excel could allowed us to do addition of data that is there in various cells. What it will also allow me to do is to do statistical functions on the data in the cell. So, I could say average of these 30, right. So, what am I saying here? Compute the average of all cells from C2 to C31. And note what we have done. We have not said C2, C3, C4, C5, etc. We have said C2 colon C31. So, this Excel will interpret to mean take all the cells from C2 to C31, and if I did that, I would get the average, right, and this is exactly the average that we were seeing over here, right. Now, if I just copied this formula again and pasted it in the next column, you could see I will get 4.266 and I will get 4.03, right. Now, so this is good, right, you can get, so we'll label this row as average score. We could also, as an example, try and figure out what is the minimum score in physics. How would we do that? We would do that by saying, let us say min. Min is a function that will allow you to compute the minimum, and again select C2 to C31, right, and this will give me the minimum score of the students in maths, and some students seems to have got 0. Similarly, what is the minimum score in all the 3 is 0. Let us now look at the maximum score. And how would we do that? This is we would do by saying max, and max of the same C2 to C31, right, and the max score seems to be 10. And in this case, the max score for all the 3 is 10. Okay, that is good. So, looks like some students are doing really well, some other students are not doing so well, but then I also want to see what is the sum of their marks, and if I drag this, then I will get the sum of all their marks, right. So, when I click on a cell and I drag its bottom corner, the formula in that cell gets filled in all the cells that I have selected, right. Let me just show it to you once again. So let us delete all the data from here. Now, this formula C2 plus D2 plus E2, I could just click the bottom right corner, keep the mouse button pressed and just drag it below, and every cell now has the corresponding formula. So, it has C3 plus D3 plus E3 and so on and so forth. Okay, very good. So, now we know what are the max of each student. Now, the university where I work also gives classes, right. So, it says if or it gives numerical grades. So, we would say that if you got more than 20 marks, you get grade A. between 15 and 20 you get B, between 10 and 15 you get C, and below 10 you get D. Okay. So, how I want to assign grades to the students, and I want to do this automatically. Of course, I can look at the data and say, hey, this guy has got 24, therefore he's got an A. This guy has got 15, so he is a B. This guy has got 7, so he is a D, etc. But can I do this automatically? Okay. So, what Excel allows me to do is to use a function called if. Okay. So, I will say fill this cell with a computed value, and what is the value? If. Okay. And the first thing I want to do is, and you guys have done computational thinking, so you know how ifs work, right. So, if the value in F2 is greater than 20, then fill this cell with A, right, with the string A. What happens if it is less than 20? Then I want to check if it is more than 15, right. So, let us say if, and I could here instead of, again I will say F2 is greater than or equal to 15. Note that I have now said greater than or equal to instead of greater than 15. Then give the person a grade B. What happens if it is less than 15? Let us check if it is greater than 10. Okay. If again F2 is greater than or equal to 10, then give the person C, else give the person D. And now I have to remember to close all the brackets, right, and Excel will helpfully tell you if it is closing. So, now I have closed all the brackets, and you can see that this formula calculates that the student must get A. Why is it saying that? What did it do? It checked if F2 is greater than 20. F2 was greater than 20, so it populated this cell with the value A. Let us now copy this formula and put it in the next cell, and it is computing B. Why did it compute B? It looked at the value in F3. Is it greater than 20? It is not. So, it went to the else part. What is the else part telling me? The else part is saying if F3 is greater than or equal to 15, is this value greater than or equal to 15? Yes. So, it populated it with B, right. Now, the next student, this student got a D, and this is correct, right. So, what did this formula do? It checked, is 7 greater than 20? No. Then is 7 greater than 15? No. Is 7 greater than or equal to 10? No. Hence D. Okay. So, I can now just drag this entire date formula down, and now I have got the student, the marks for each of the students, the grades for each of the students, right. So, this is a basic introduction to what data sheets can or worksheets can do. Please note that this is not a comprehensive introduction. Okay. I would encourage you to play around, look up, read some books, read the help. There is an excellent help section that is available both with Google Docs as well as Microsoft Excel. Please learn to play around and see how you can do some more interesting things with Excel. The bulk of the computation in this course is going to be done with Excel. So, the more conversant you get with Excel and the sooner you get conversant with Excel, the better it will be for you. Thank you. End of segment 1.